Okay, we're continuing with Hilchos Machale of the Kochavim, Kuf Yud Tet. We are continuing Seif Gimel. Mutar leitin mishalo l'chashu lecho devarim masurim kadei sheyatakin ayavashalo. So you know a friend, you know someone who's chashu to eat non-kosher, but you got the wrong ingredients, and you know he's a really good cook. So he has, one up on you. So you want him to cook the food for you. So you ask him, and then assuming you avoid issues of bishul akum, right? We're just discussing kashrus over here. So can you give it to him? So we'll keep reading. Velo chayshinan shem yachlefenu. You're providing him with all the kosher ingredients. Let's say it doesn't have to even be in your house. It just has to be a way, obviously, to make sure that there's no bishul akum and other issues. He has to have kosher pots. But the issue is that we're discussing is you're not worried about him switching the food on you. Kivan she'eno chashut ala geza. He's chashut for eating treif, but he's still a relatively from person. He's not machal Shabbos for Hesia. We're going to get to that. Generally, we consider him somewhat from, and he's certainly not chashut on gezel. V'im notin l'mishachoshesh b'takanto. However, let's say you're worried he's not so experienced. He might start cooking for you and burn it or mess it up and get something wrong. And we're talking about someone who is chashud to eat treif or to buy treif. Especially in the chutzlaretz, it's easier to buy non-kosher meat. But v'hu chashud lechol dvarim asurim aser shema itkalkel ma shenotim, because he might make a mistake, he might burn the food or get something wrong, and then he's going to want to recook it for you. He's going to be embarrassed. He wants you to enjoy his food. So he's going to go to the store. And again, what store is he going to buy from? The cheapest one. So he's going to go buy non-kosher ingredients, and he might switch it on you. And Kate, so therefore, in that situation, it's asa. Because we're not kosher, he's going to take your better piece of meat, steal it, and trade it with a worse piece of meat that's cheaper. But we're afraid he might ruin it. Ketzad. What's an example? Harishanata machamoso hachashuda ala iser. So let's say your mother-in-law is chashud on not keeping kosher. So it's usher to give her food. Again, this is, let's say, in her kitchen, assuming everything else is done beheter, because in your kitchen, well, it depends. It could be your kitchen also. If she can bring food there. Okay. So then it's usher. You can't just leave her there and have her take care of cooking, because shabusha or bosha michatna, she's going to be embarrassed from her son-in-law. V'rotza b'takarat bita, and she wants to make things good for her daughter, and then impress the daughter's mother to the son-in-law. L'fichach mechalefet lo rabbeto. So if she messes up a little bit the first time, she'll go buy new ingredients and switch it. Okay. And so too, if you give it to an innkeeper, those hotels, a small little inn, and so she would cook for you. You give her the ingredients, she'll cook for you. But she might be embarrassed from her guests. Again, one always needs to think when it applies, doesn't apply in your situation. And so in any case where you have to be worried that she's going to come switch the food and buy new food on you, then it's a problem if it's someone who's chashud for eating treif. Umikol makom, if you're not worried about her switching it on you, then it's okay to give her to cook. And the Rama adds, kol shekein lahakel, mutter lahafkid etzlo, shiachzir lo dvarim, kamo shepkida etzlo. But these people, obviously, it wouldn't be an issue if they're not cooking for you. You're just going to give it to them to put in their fridge, let's say, and they're going to watch it for you. So it seems you do not have to worry about. They're not chashik for geza. Again, when that applies, Lamais is an interesting case discussion. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. There's no end to discussing, so we'll just leave the principle, and I think we'll move forward. here. Yeah, the shach just again, it just depends on the case itself. You know, sometimes an innkeeper wouldn't care less if she overdoes the food a little bit and won't be embarrassed. So then there's not an issue. Every case legufo. Okay, let's go to Dalet. Seif Dalet. Hachashu ledavar echad. Ein chashu lidvarim acheret. Person who's chashud for one thing is not chashud for other things. Aval kol ma shetzarich leoto davar chashuv gam alav. But for anything that's needed or helpful for that thing, the person also becomes chashuv, kind of like a piggyback. Uh, anyway, because of the main thing, a secondary thing.
On seafood, but not on pork.
So then it's right. Seafood and pork are two different things. So if you're chashuv on one, you're not chashuv on the other. But this is telling you if the second thing is for the first thing, you're only chashuv for one thing, but a second thing comes along. You'll understand when you keep reading. Kigon, what's an example? Again, there'll be other examples, but this is one simple example. Mi shehaya chashuv linkor chelev inkom shuman. A person is chashuv for selling treif chelev instead of kosher shuman. So obviously, so you can't buy chelev from him. But what about normally when it comes to selling nuts, he's not chashiv. He's going to sell you kosher nuts. I don't know, trumas masros, whatever it is. But what's the case? He's chashiv for selling chelev. And when his normal custom of selling chelev, how does he drum up business? Nowadays it would be candy, but in those days it was nuts. By the front of his store, he would call out, I'm giving you free nuts. Here, take a sample. Take some nuts, a handful of nuts. Anyone who comes buys for me. So therefore the nuts, there's no problem with the nuts per se, but because he's chashut for chelev, and he's trying to sell chelev, and he's using nuts to bribe or lure the customers, konsin oto, that's his lost leader, whatever it is. So therefore, you give him a knas. Chazal says we give him a knas, shaloyim karafilu egozim, and it's aser midarabanan to buy egozim, these nuts from, or these candies, whatever the case is, from this person. Next halacha. Sif hey. Hachashid al isra chamor, chashid al akal mimenu ba'onesh. Okay, so now you have these chashud for, let's say a person's established to be a chashud for a certain avera, and we're judging what's chamor and what's kal, what's more severe and less severe based on the onesh. That's how you read it, based on the onesh. So a person is chashud for something more chamor. Is he now, so for something chamor he's going to do, certainly he should be more lax for something that you get a smaller punishment for. So that the halacha is you are. If you're chashud for a chamor, based on the level of onesh, so now you're chashud for a kal. Now, happens to be an interesting discussion. The Shach writes, it's only referring to the same category, like two foods. If you're chashud for a chamor food, you'll be chashud for a lesser food. Chelev is worse than chazer, just as an aside. But whatever it is, the example would be for foods, you apply this. But for halachas that are not, if you're chashud for a chamor food, that wouldn't apply to a kal food. Igros Moshe in Yoreh Beis Mem Gimel, he argues on the Shach, and I mean the Shach gets it from a Rishon, but Lamaisa the Igros Moshe thinks that the Shulchan Aruch doesn't pass in that way. So he argues Lamaisa if it's from one meaning to another category of halacha. Okay. Ella, anyways, the Shulchan Aruch itself is not 100% clear.
He's chashud on nida, which is a courage.
So nida to ochel would be an example. Okay, fine. Ella in kain hu chamor be'enei b'nei adam shezihirim bo yoter b'chamor. So here's an exception though. If you're chashud for something more severe, you would think you're chashud for something less severe. but it has to be where you believe it's more chamor. If all your friends, the whole community thinks it's that what's really chamor in the Torah is not so chamor at all, so um, then this wouldn't apply, uh, right? If everyone thinks that the kal is really more chamor, then you obviously can't make that um, deduction. Okay. What? Exactly. Very good. Like chaylev and chazer. Everyone thinks chazer is more chamor than chaylev. You ask anyone on the street, even a Talmud Chacham, perhaps. Many people would think chazer is more than chaylev at first glance. Depends what type of Talmud Chacham. But it's, according to the Torah, it's the opposite. So that wouldn't be a case where you can learn from chamor to kal. Very good. Now, just to make it a drop confusing, um, and then we'll move on. How exactly do you apply this and interpret it is a little bit tricky. So the Shach points out, according to the Tur, that really it all goes by what's chamor be'enei adam. אפילו אין החמור חמור ממש ממנו בעונש, אלא חמור בעיני בני אדם. Really, it's dependent upon the people and not the onesh. He says, according to the Shach, says, according to the Shulchan Aruch, there's two ways to read it. It's unclear exactly. What's more, I'm not going to get into nitty gritty, but what's more, these are the suffix. So what's more important, according to the Shulchan Aruch, what the people think, or um, what's more chamor? I don't want to be confusing, but I mean, you can look inside, because you can have cases where it's equal. People treat it equally. So then, what's more koveya? Is it what's more chamor ba'onesh, or what's more chamor b'nei adam? Okay, I'll leave it like that. I'll just mention it. It's not 100% clear how to interpret it. Um, Take too long to explain, or difficult. Okay, then I just want to share an important Igros Moshe. The same Igros Moshe is also in Chelik Aleph, similar, very important. So one of them's in Igros Moshe Yoreh, Chelik Bet, and then Gimel, and then I forget exactly where, but it's also in Aleph, Yoreh Chelik Aleph. He points out that it's his Chiddush. Um, there's a difference between Ne'emanas and Yediah. And we're going to see this again, and it's going to be alluded to in the Gra as well. I think we're going to get to it, where he points out many times a person doesn't have ne'emanas, and you cannot trust them. But if you know them, if you know the person, how he behaves and the actions, there are times where you can rely on them, not because you're asking them and you don't know and you're trusting what they're saying, but because you know they're only going to buy kosher. For example, he says, bishat in a person's house, there are times where the owner of the house, the cook of the house, is not shomer Shabbos b'chlal, and he eats treif. But you're allowed to eat when he cooks for you, or you're allowed to eat in his house, assuming there's no bishul akum issues. That's all another sugya. But um, so anyway, so you're right. Sometimes you could be, let's say, a child by a parent is this situation. The Baal Tshuva can eat in his parents' house. So there are times he says you are allowed to, but this is not to be relied on in general for everybody, especially for stores when it's a business. How far to take it is a question.
There is with the communist kids.
Yeah, that's this case exactly. It's with Russia, but it's the same idea, communists. But that's where he brings it in Chelik Aleph. Um, and it could be even a little bit less kal if you're more kal, a little easier in Eretz Yisrael, where it's more difficult to buy real non-kosher ingredients. But again, it's just something to think about when it applies. But there are times when one could be mako. Let's keep reading. I think we're in Vav, right? Okay. Vav, see Vav. Hachashid al shnei dvarim. A person who's chashid on two things, two different averos. And here the Shach says even if it's in different categories, and um, okay, even if it's called whether it's onish or be'enei habrios, doesn't matter. Anyways, you are chashud on two things, v'chazer bo, and you did tshuva on both things. All right, so now you're reinstated. We see you did tshuva. We believe you now. You're not chashud anymore. V'yatza midei chashad shneim. On both of them, you're good. But then a year later, we see you're going back to your ways, and on one of those two items, you're a muhsak at the same time for the two items. You did tshuva together. Again, exactly how to apply it, it's always a little bit of a question. But now we see you went back on one of them. Afilu hu hakal shebishneim, even on the lighter of the two, because you got your status with the two of them together. So now you went back on one. Chosheshim shema chazal asuru bishneim. If you went back and you're not so, and you're chozer b'tshuva and you're not so much chozer b'tshuva anymore, how do we know how far you went back to your bad ways? And so therefore, now you are chashud al shneim. Okay, fine. Let's go to Zayin. Okay, so now a person he's known to violate one of the mitzvahs in the Torah, right? So he becomes chashud certainly for that one. So we're going to say it's only that one. Whatever you're mefursam for, whatever you're chashud for, that's the one. What's the exception? Chutz mi'avodah zarah. If we know you do avodah zarah, v'chol Shabbos lefarhesia, or you do a chol Shabbos lefarhesia, right? In front of a rav, and you wouldn't be embarrassed. Right? The whole sugya we learned earlier in the beginning of your idea. O she'eno ma'amin b'divrei rabbeinu zal, or you don't believe in the Chazal. You only your type. Okay, whatever it is. So this type of a person, he is. So for those three things, you lose your na'amanos for everything. But if it's not one of these three, so then whatever you're meforsam for, whatever you're chashid for, then so you're not ne'eman on those, but you're ne'eman b'sha'ar isurim. It doesn't affect everything else. Because, okay, we know when it comes to kashrus, you like to eat non-kosher. You can't help yourself. But for other things, you're still from. You still keep Taras HaMishpacha, you still keep Shabbos, you're still from. Ubeshel acherim, ne'eman, afilo oto davar. And you're even trustworthy for other people on that same matter. If we're talking about food, you can testify, you could be ne'eman, we're going to get to, this is different, but as far, it could be different. Can you be a mashkiach? Good question. Perhaps you can. Because you're ne'eman, afilu, right? And there's also the issue there. You have a mirtas. There's cameras on you. You're going to lose your job. You're going to pay for it. Could be. Ne'eman. Well, cheating a business, you're no good probably. Okay, ne'eman afilu al oto davar. Okay, so it needs to think about it. Ubashel acher ne'eman afilu al oto davar, on even that item for other people. Lo mar mutaru, to say that this food is kosher. Okay, and the Shach just points out, we say ne'eman b'shar isurim, even for himself, like he wants to sell other products. You want to sell a suit that doesn't have shatnez, for example, nothing to do with kosher food. So then you're allowed to, even to sell it, or for other foods, you're allowed to eat with him. It's only for what he is chashud for, that item. And then the Shach just points out, when we say, as you alluded to, when it comes to isurim, so then if you're only chashud for one, you're not chashud for another. But when it comes to money, so then whoever is chashud for one thing is possible to testify for something else, even for other people. Because then you enter the category of money. And okay, let's continue the Ramah. Mishu chashu b'davar delo mashma le'inche shehu avera lo mikre chashu. Let's say you're chashu for something, but your community, the Jews you live with, no one considers that to be an avera. So then, lo mikre chashiv. You don't have the category of being called chashiv because chashiv is it's something very negative. It shows that you have a disregard for a Kodesh Baruch Hu's laws in this category. But here, everyone's doing it. Again, I'm sure we can all come up with our own many examples. Different tziburs are not makpid on certain things. So on those things, you're not. What?
The classic is Lashon Hara.
Classic.
That's
Lashon Hara. Okay. So then, mihu leoso davar eno neman. Now, you can't be trustworthy on that topic. Right? If everyone's eating a certain item, but it's not kosher, so he's not ne'amanas. You can't eat it if he tells you it's kosher, but he's not chashuv for it. So the obvious question is, so what's the practical nafkamina? Because if you're not chashuv, but you don't know, so what's the advantage of not being chashuv? So the Shach has a couple examples. I'll just mention two. One is for the halacha that we learned. If you're chashud on the chamor, then on the kal you also have to be chashud for it. So that doesn't apply over here because you're not chashud. You think it's mutter. Everyone thinks. I mean, okay, it might be davar pashut because of that halacha itself. But anyways, another example that we're going to mention shortly is ne'eman on his own. Just if you ask him, he's not ne'eman. But it could be that he is ne'eman if he makes a shavua. Okay. Um, let's see. Here, I'll just mention. This is on this page. It's actually going back towards the beginning of the seat. The Grub points out that um, sometimes you're ne'eman, right? He points out that you could be a gazlan uh, or do certain averos, even midarabanan. This is going to come up later in Choshen Mishpah, or maybe in your day as well. But a person could become nifsal if you can no longer give a kosher edus. You can't bring him in to testify and base them. But he just points out though that even though you can have a person who's pasal to give edus, he can still be kosher to be ne'eman. So there are things you need to have edus, you need to have two edim while he's out. Sometimes one aid's enough, but whatever it is. But when it comes to it, so you want to know if it's kosher. Eid echa ne'eman bisur. So even if a person is pasal edus, you could still be ne'eman. Just an interesting or important chiluk. The Aruch Shulchan also talks a little bit about this. I forget if it was in Kuf Yud Tet or Kuf Yud Chet. I think Kuf Yud Chet. But anyways, he says sometimes, yeah. So anyways, he says sometimes you can believe a person, but similar idea. You can believe him, but he doesn't. He's puzzled for edus. Even sometimes you can say, well, the guy has no, as we had this before, by switching foods. The guy has no benefit. You have no reason to assume he's going to lie. And so therefore, you might say, you can trust him. So it depends. Sometimes you could trust him, but it doesn't help you when you need edus. Classic examples in Evan Ezer when he talks about an aguna. So sometimes you can believe the guy. He has no reason to lie to you. He has no benefit. But if it's a case where you need to have edus, you need to have edus. So, okay, just an important color. Let's finish the Ramah. Let's see. We read there to the period. Mi shenohed be'ezeh davar esa mikoach shesover shedinahu hachi. A person is makpid on a halacha because he thinks that's the halacha. O mikoach omer stam. That's his chumrah. Shehichmer al atzmo. He's mutar. He's makpid on himself, but really it's mutar. Mutar lechol im acherim shenoigim boheter. He's allowed to eat in someone's house or at the same table with someone who holds its mutar. They're all eating it. You're allowed to eat there. The vadai lo yachiluhu davar shu noeg bo eser. I'll just leave it as a question. Look back if you have to put some kind of distinction between you and your friend if you're eating together. But the point of this halacha is you don't have to worry about he's going to give you what you're machmer for, which even though it's just a chumrah, and it's mutter to eat in his house and to trust him. If he tells you it's, I didn't put that ingredient in there, then it's not a problem. Okay, we'll stop.